Hi everyone, welcome to week 10. I hope you had the chance to take a little bit of a break from the module for the past week and got to enjoy some time for yourself. This is the start of block 2, which is all about designing for and with others, which I think is the most important and critical aspect of designing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to give just a few recommendations about sort of in preparation of weeks 10 and 11. There's a lot of theory in it, so I just want to prepare you for that. And we're also going to talk about TMA2, which is a really important classical design situation that you need to take on. And I just want to, again, prepare you for that and just start putting some things in your mind about what you should be doing and what you should be preparing for. So when it comes to designing for and with others, it's all about the idea that you're a type of person with certain abilities and certain values, and sometimes you may be designing for people who share those same values or those abilities, but other times that may not be the case, and you'll be designing for people who may have nothing to do with you or may have nothing in common with you, or you may be designing with people who are similar to you or quite different. So it's about thinking, how do you navigate those situations and what do you need to know in preparation of that? Now, when you're designing for others, it's all about sort of a critical point of user-centered design. So putting the person who does use these products at the heart of what you're designing and being able to think about, what their experiences are. People are experts in their own personal experiences, and sometimes it is good to, sort of do research about different topics. So let's say you're talking about older people who use, mobility aids. And it may be really good to do research about that, but then it's really, really critical, and like the juicy, really good opportunities come from hearing their stories about how, they navigate the city. What are their personal life stories about, using a mobility aid in their everyday life? What are some of the opportunities that they face? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the tricks that they've developed, or some of the things that, from experience they've learned to do and become experts in, using a mobility aid that you may not know about? And being able to really distill and harness that and turn that into really good, useful solutions for them. That's sort of what designing for others is all about. Now, designing with others is similar in some ways, where you may be in a team where people are a lot like you, so you can already start talking the same language. It may be with a group of other designers, so you already know all of the same lingo. You may be able to talk about the same things or manufacturing processes or key designers or key design products. But in other cases, you may be working in really interdisciplinary teams, meaning that there might be a marketing team or someone from engineering, someone from finances, someone from the board of directors, and they all have usually very different interests, and sometimes they have very different perspectives about what they expect to find in the final solution. And that's all about, being able to communicate with them and try to understand how we can all work together and how you can use all of those different assets and bring them together and make use of them to create a really good solution. So in the weeks that will come, you'll start looking at things like collaborative design or participative design or design democracy, all of these kind of concepts. But the crux of that is really that, in design, you're going to work with different people. Sometimes there might be a majority view about what the solution should be, and sometimes that's not necessarily how you agree. And you'll need to make a good case to sway things in a direction that makes sense to the final solution and really center on, again, the user and being able to relate things back and bring everyone in harmony. So when it comes to some of the sort of cautionary tales in that sense for weeks 10 and 11, I want to make sure that it's very theory heavy in there. There's a lot of talk about like the underpinnings of participative design or the different assigned roles that you may face. Now, I want you to all take this with quite a grain of salt, just because some of these are not necessarily how you're going to face design, and it may be something that you'll never really have to experience in whatever you do in your practice. But it's about using these as sort of cues to understand that people can have really different ways of understanding something, and that may mean that even though people have the same terminology, it may not mean the same thing. For instance, I worked on a project with these two engineers, and in a brainstorming session, we talked about innovation and we talked about these outlandish ideas. And when we talked afterwards, one of the engineers said that the term outlandish was really this like critical point to them, that outlandish ideas are what drive innovation. And then in the other case, another engineer said that outlandish ideas meant that we were swaying, that we were getting too far from the subject matter, and we were actually wasting our time. So you can see that everyone was agreeing that outlandish ideas were potentially a part of innovation, but for one person it was a catalyst, and in the other case it was this big obstacle. So it's just about being aware that people may not see or understand or feel the same way about different things, and knowing that people have different interests, strengths, weaknesses, and making the most of that. Now, finally, I want to talk about TMA2 because that's a really important part throughout all of this. I want you to start thinking about, this is all about designing for and with others, and it's a classic design situation. You need to find problems, generate ideas, develop prototypes, and really propose a solution. But those problems, you should really rely on others. Take whatever opportunity that you have with either friends or family and ask them about their experiences. What are some of the problems that they find, or what are some of the issues they find in society? In the tutorial we talked about excessive packaging, and from there we were able to start looking at the A to Z experience of someone if they didn't have packaging in supermarkets. And then what would that mean for them in terms of the course that they would have to take? What are some of the things that they would have to consider? They have to bring the packaging at the beginning. They have to maybe weigh it. How do they validate? If it's a hard plastic, are they overpaying? How do they sort it out at the checkout? And all of these different things, when you go through that entire process, you start to find these different opportunities for a solution. And that is really, pulling out these solutions or pulling out these opportunities from these really real experienced problems is something that is so much more useful and so much more valued in design than all of the market research that you could do, all of the online searches that you could perform, really asking these people about it. Now, in the TMA2, it talks about, it's quite generic in what kind of opportunities you can look at, what kind of problems you can find. My serious suggestion is that you stay old school. Don't focus on apps, don't focus on graphic interfaces, only because there's a lot of theory behind that in terms of what the ideal user experiences might be, and that's just not where you are right now, and it's not something that you can necessarily be an expert in at this moment, whereas maybe a potato peeler is something that you can find the ergonomic issues of it, or you may be able to hand it over to someone and really validate firsthand with the solutions that you'll maybe come up with, or some of the prototypes that you'll test. You can really have that experience, whereas you aren't going to code an entire app and validate in that way, so you don't really know if what you're doing is as useful as you would hope. Whereas these old school, I say old school, but physical objects or these physical artifacts are really where you can find those great opportunities and those moments to really create good solutions and really get a good understanding of what this TMA is all about. So just keep all of that in mind. The takeaway from all of this is, think about others. Users are experts in their own experiences, and you're the designer who has to distill what's going on to find these great opportunities. And it's all about asking the right type of questions. Learn about their stories, learn about their experiences, and let them do the talking. When it comes to the content of weeks 10 and 11, again, don't take them too seriously in the sense that you shouldn't be memorizing them, because that's not what it's all about. It should be about using them as cues and try to relate them back to yourself. Who is the leader in your group of friends when you go to the restaurant, or who is the market researcher, I should say, when you think about buying a house, all of those different things that are part of your life, and think about the different roles that people sort of assign themselves or fall into. When it comes to the TMA, finally, just find problems first. It's not about finding solutions yet. You need to spend a lot of time finding a problem, breaking it down, thinking about what it is, what it isn't, synonyms for however you formulated this problem. Think about the user-centered design of it. So really ask that A to Z process, learn about the stories of that problem before you move into developing solutions. Find that big number of ideas, and of course, test and experiment quickly. So just like we talked about in sketches, quantity over quality, this is sort of the same thing. If you have an idea and you want to test it, use Play-Doh, cardboard, masking tape, use all of those little easy to find materials around the house and try to make something so you can really test it and say, this does or this doesn't work. And you can move on quickly into some really, really good solutions. And just as I've said before, make sure you document everything really well. This is a critical point of being able to document things and being professional in the way that you design stuff, in the way that you present stuff. It's going to be very important for this TMA, the quality of what you present, but then also all of these images that you're creating are going to be super useful in your EMA or your examination at the end of all of this, where they do ask you to reflect back and provide photos. And it's just something that is an excellent practice that demonstrates you know what you're doing and you know how to take clean, high quality images that people can really understand what you're trying to communicate to them. So with that in mind, enjoy week 10 and 11. It's all about designing with others and for others, and make the most of this and just think about the user all the time. So with that in mind, I hope you have a nice week. See you.